to the 5-Minute Photo Class. I'm your host, Jack Allred. Today, we'll be talking about improving your photography by controlling the light on your subjects. What makes one photograph stand out above another? Is it the subject? Is it how the scene is framed or what elements are included? What about using traditional rules of composition effectively? Actually, all of these things are important, and sometimes one is more important to an image's success than any other. But the single most important feature of any great photograph is the quality of the light captured in the image. This is true whether you present your image in color or black and white. In this topic, I won't discuss landscapes or other images where the subject is more than a few feet from your camera. There are ways to choose the time of day or the weather conditions or other factors to improve on those images. But for this topic, I want to narrow down to how you can enhance the close-up subject you're shooting by either subtracting light, diffusing light, or by adding additional light. Think like your camera thinks for a minute. No matter what type of camera you use, it sees the entire scene merely as varying shades of light and color hues. It can't see a difference between a person's face and a tree that might be right behind it. It can't tell that the sun is so bright that the person's eyes disappear into shadow. While you can see these differences, it's easy to let the significance of your subject blind you to the quality of the light. You should use light to define your subject and set it apart from the background or other elements in the scene. Let's concentrate on a person's face as our subject for this discussion. There are two qualities of light that will be particularly unflattering to a face. One is where bright light, like midday sun for instance, produces high contrast and dark shadows. The other is the lack of contrast produced by a dreary, overcast day or soft non-directional indoor lighting like overhead fluorescent lights. We're talking about the two extremes of contrast here, and just so we agree on the term, contrast is the difference between the brightest and the darkest light values on the subject. If you want to enhance the subject's face, you need to produce a pleasing amount of contrast in the middle ranges, with the light value being somewhat brighter than the background. Conveniently, there are two good ways to modify this contrast. Let's deal first with harsh directional light like the sun. This discussion would apply equally to other sources of light that are similar in quality. You can't control where the sun is coming from, but you can position your subject in relation to it. However, it will produce bright highlights in your image on the side closer to the sun. In order to avoid overexposure, you meter for these brighter highlights. The shadows on the side away from the sun are so much darker than the highlights that you lose detail in these areas. You need to narrow this range of light to one that your camera is capable of capturing. First, you can fill in the shadows using either reflected light or an additional light source like a flash unit. A reflector on the side away from the light source can be a wall, a light-colored car, or other object that reflects the sun. Place the person between it and the sun to bounce that light back into the shadows. Many photographers purchase what's called a bounce reflector. This is a fold-up piece of material with a plastic or metal frame to make it unfold into a flat surface. If you buy a 5-way bounce, you can use a gold, a silver, or a white surface to provide different qualities to the light you bounce back into the shadows. And this type of bounce also has a diffuser that will scatter and soften the light as it passes through. Just place it between the subject and the sun. This will disperse the directional rays of the light source in all directions and make the light much softer, eliminating the stark differences between the highlights and the shadows. So, you can use a reflector or a diffuser to either bounce light into the shadows or diffuse the light to lessen the shadows. But you can also use a flash to add light to the existing scene. If the light is bright and harsh like I described, turn your flash on when you take the picture. This is called fill flash, and it's a technique that requires more discussion than I have time for in this topic. You can look in your camera's manual for a description, and there are tutorials in books and on the web. If you can get your flash unit off your camera by using an extension cord or perhaps an infrared transmitter, you can provide much more directionality to the fill flash. And finally, you can use a technique known as flash exposure compensation to control the amount of light your flash sends into the shadows of your subject's face. This is a great way to balance the amount of flash with the ambient light. To summarize, a subject in a photograph, like a person's face, should be slightly brighter than the background, and it should have some contrast between light and dark values. However, the range should not be so small as to be flat or so large as to produce harsh shadows. To control the amount of contrast and the directionality of light falling on the subject, you can bounce light from the main light source, you can diffuse the main light source to soften it, or you can add light from an external flash unit. These are all incredibly creative tools that will help improve the quality of your photographs. Learn them and add them to your toolbox. I invite you to listen to the other selections in the 5-Minute Photo Class series. Here's to better photography.